I never meant to become the villain. I just wanted to solo honor mode. Honor mode is the hardest difficulty in Baldur's Gate 3, and the toughest part is that you have a single life. Honor mode is designed to be a challenge for 4 players, but I went in solo. My only rule was to survive at all costs, and no barrel bombs. But the deeper I went, the more the run spiraled out of control. It all started back when I was abducted by squids who infected me with a parasite that would turn me into a squid if I didn't find a cure fast. Initially, I woke aboard the squid ship flying through hell. As I was searching for an escape, I was jumped by a bullfrog woman named Lae'zel. Lae'zel asked to join forces, but I told her I'm doing this run solo, so she jumped ship. I went to heal, only for Lae'zel to be resurrected inside the helm of the ship. Before I could make it there myself, Lae'zel took over the ship by connecting the control tentacles. Lae'zel crashed the ship into a beach, but I somehow miraculously survived. As I brushed myself off, I heard some banging in the distance. I approached to find a goth girl named Shadowheart beating on a door to some ruins. Shadowheart shared that she had also been infected on the ship, and said we had to find a healer for our parasites immediately, or else we would transform into squids. So I followed her lead up the nearby cliffside and continued along the path until I came upon Lae'zel, who was ensnared in a frog trap. After helping Lae'zel for getting me off the Nautiloid, she shared that her frog people in the mountains have the cure to our parasites. I told her I'd be sure to check it out if I couldn't find another solution, and continued up the path until I heard shouting. I rushed over to find goblins had chased some people back to what appeared to be a settlement. So I jumped into the fray. Oh my god! Although many didn't make it out alive, I did. Afterwards, I continued through the gate to find myself in a druid grove that was acting as a haven for some refugees. Once Zevlor socked Aridin for being Aridin, he shared that the druids were about to kick out the refugees and seal the grove from outsiders. So I agreed to talk to the druids' leader about keeping their borders open. But before that, I made my way around the grove to gather what gear I could. What I lack in combat power, I made up for with funds by repeatedly selling my pact-bound weapon for unlimited gold. After buying some steroids from an old lady and using a blacksmith's own arrow of darkness to steal his armor, I continued around the grove only to find Shadowheart.
If I wanted a tail, I'd kill a cat.
Watch your mouth, there's nothing wrong with tails.
Calm yourself.
Shadowheart asked to join forces to search for a healer, but I told her I'm traveling alone on this one. Thus, I continued into the druid's inner sanctum, where the leader, Kaga, was actively threatening a refugee child. After talking Kaga into letting the child go, she still refused to protect the rest of the refugees, but she at least allowed me to get my parasite checked out by their healer Nettie. Unfortunately, Nettie determined she couldn't heal me herself, so she directed me westward to an old Selûnite temple where the grove's most reputable healer Halsin was taken by goblins. But as I headed for Halsin, I was stopped by a bard named Volo who said the refugees had captured one such goblin who had valuable information. Further, Volo said the goblins had abandoned their goddess in favor of one called the Absolute. So I headed over to the prison to find the goblin Saza, who shared that the goblins had a priestess that could heal anything and that she would even guide me there if I release her. I decided this is likely my best bet to safely infiltrate the goblins' camp, so I picked her lock, only to be stopped by a refugee on my way out. I convinced the refugee that Saza is leading me to her camp, so we were granted safe passage for all of 10 steps before another refugee named Goo stopped us again. Except this time, I was not as persuasive, so we tried to make a dash for the exit, only to draw the attention of even more refugees and Shadowheart. Saza chugged my invisibility potion and waddled out, leaving me alone to fend for myself. After Shadowheart nearly sundered me, I found myself surrounded, but I heard grunting coming from some nearby rocks, calling me over, so I disengaged to flee into a hidden trapdoor that led to a hideout filled with refugee children. The children were thankful I saved their friend from the druid's leader, but their leader, Mol, now asked if I could help them take revenge by stealing the druid's sacred idol, and in exchange she would give me a powerful ring. I felt I owed them for saving me, and I could really use the ring, so I agreed. I then called upon my patron to get me out of the grove, so he teleported me out to his home. After warning me to be more careful, he gave me some food before safely teleporting me back on the path towards the goblins' camp. After recruiting a new friend, looting a rundown village for a new hat, and rescuing a gnome named Barkus for a pair of boots, I came upon a dying hyena. Seeing that I was in no position to fight a pack of flesh-consuming creatures alone, I fled into the nearby toll house to look for backup. The occupants said they were holy paladins and took kindly to my monopoly money. Now that I had a set of allies, we returned to the creatures. What I didn't expect was that my new allies would refuse to fight, leaving me to fight for myself. I tried to hide in a cloud of darkness, but the creatures ran in to attack me, so I tried retreating to the toll house again. But the creatures ran me down, and as my friends stood by watching me be mauled, I noticed yet another escape hatch. So I made a break for the exit like before. This time was different, and I apparently misjudged how far I could run. The gnolls expectedly got me, but we were relatively early, so I'll give it another try. After connecting the transponder myself this time, I took a brief detour to launch my former friends off the cliff for watching me die. But as I went to collect their loot, I encountered a woman having a hot flash. My former life flashed before my eyes, and I didn't have the heart to turn her away, so I invited her to stay in my camp with Scratch. I then caught up with Saza, who talked me into her camp, but on the way in, I started to have a mental break. I began to hear a disembodied voice commanding me to aid its three chosen in the search for the prism. Just as I thought I was about to succumb to the voices, Shadowheart came into the rescue using her magic box. Shadowheart explained that her prism-shaped artifact acted as a shield against the voices that spoke through our parasites, and that I needed her if I was to survive. Fearing another bout of schizophrenia, I invited Shadowheart back to camp to protect us all with her artifact. I then pressed forward into the goblin camp, where I spotted Volo putting on a questionable performance. My presence may or may not have thrown him off even more, causing his goblin captor to take him further inside the camp. After getting my toes licked by a goblin who gifted me his toe ring as thanks, I followed Saza into the heart of the camp. Saza talked our way in and led me to one of their leaders, Night Warden Minthara. Minthara began to communicate through her own parasite, identifying me as one of the Absolute's favorites, a true soul, due to my own parasite. Saza divulged the location of the grove to Minthara, who then asked me to infiltrate by throwing the gate open for her to raid. Considering how my last fight went, I was reluctant to take a fight with Minthara in the heart of her camp. As such, I figured having some backup at the grove would be my best chance of survival. But before I could head to the grove to warn the mostly innocent inhabitants, Minthara began to head there herself, saying she would attack the next morning. Seeing Minthara leave sent me into a panic. In my panicked state, I kidnapped her and brought her directly to Kaga. I don't know what I'm doing. But as I tried to set down Minthara, she mysteriously disappeared. With Minthara on the loose somewhere in the grove's inner sanctum, I returned to the goblin camp in search of the druid Halsin to cure my parasite. During my search, I found Volo, who I purchased using my monopoly money. After directing Volo back to my camp, I eventually located a captive bear inside the goblin's prison. I tried to save the poor animal, only for it to become apparent that this bear was in fact Halsin himself. Fortunately, I lacked the power to rescue Halsin and was forced to retreat as he fell to his captors. But I still had hope as I next found the goblin priestess Saza spoke about, Gut. Out of alternatives, I allowed Gut to brand me to earn her trust. Gut then invited me back into her private chapel, away from prying eyes, as she offered me a cure for my parasite. So I followed Gut back to her chapel, where she offered me a potion that would put me under while she operated on my parasite. Although I was hesitant, I figured with the death of Halsin, this was my best bet for a cure. So I drank the sleep potion. Shockingly, Gut crossed me while I was knocked out, chaining me up in her dungeon. But just as I thought this could be my end, my patron Raphael sent another of his warlocks to rescue me. This warlock introduced herself as Corilla.
Be a little more careful. That skin's valuable, and we won't always be watching.
With Gut out of the picture, I continued around her chambers where I found a valuable necklace along with a secret passage that descended underground. But first, I figured I owed it to the grove to at least try and fight off the goblins before the raid. So I tried to kidnap their last leader, Jor Ragslin, but this time I knew not to bring him to the grove's inner chamber where he could escape me. Instead, I brought him to the tallest cliff I could find and launched him off. But he was surprisingly resilient and barely survived the fall. Ragslin was not happy about what I had done, disappearing from the beach and permanently turning his entire camp against me. So with Minthara somewhere in the grove and the entire goblin army at my heels, I called upon my patron to teleport me back underground so I could simply flee and fight another day.
Oh, that's disappointing. I prefer it when my clients put up a fight.
I continued my journey through the Underdark, where I found a new set of armor and a not-so-friendly giant armored armadillo. As I fled from the beast, I stumbled upon a colony of sentient shrooms. After sharing my intentions were merely safe passage in search of a cure to my parasite, the shrooms invited me into their colony. Inside the colony, I met a poison gnome Tula, who I cured using an antidote I purchased with my monopoly money. The gnome rewarded me with a set of boots before asking me to rescue her kin from the ruins across the lake. I gathered that she had fled these ruins, where her fellow gnomes were being enslaved by evil dwarfs. Thus, I agreed to try my best to fight evil, and set off for the ruins. But before I could make it out of the colony, I was pulled aside by the whitest shroom, known as Glut.
I am the danger.
I decided some extra backup couldn't hurt, so I invited Glut to accompany me on my journey. But as I approached the lake, I spotted some of the evil dwarves. I figured perhaps I could talk my way through, but the dwarfs did not take kindly to my wide shroom companion. So the dwarfs tried jumping us. Vastly outnumbered, we were forced to retreat back to the colony. Upon our return, I noticed another hobgoblin who called his Mind Flayer colleague over. The pair introduced themselves as Blurg and Omeluum. Perhaps on account of the shrooms, this pair seemed quite friendly in contrast to the last ones I had met on my journey. Omeluum offered to examine my parasite to determine a cure. I was running out of options at this point, so I figured this is probably my best bet. Thus, Omeluum entered my mind and found my parasite to be shielded by some sort of magic. However, he suggested that perhaps he could bypass the protection using shroom alchemy. Omeluum directed me to collect some rare shrooms from a nearby tower that he would then distill into a mixture that he would use to bypass my parasite's protection to ultimately cure me. So I headed over, blasted my way past the security, scaled down the side of the tower, and broke in through the back door to collect the shrooms along with a powerful club and a magic staff. I then returned to Omeluum, who distilled the shrooms into a potion. Despite his best efforts, our shroom experiment turned out to be a failure, empowering my parasite. To apologize, Omeluum granted me access to his premium stock, which I made sure to acquire using my Monopoly money. Out of ideas, I turned in for the night to collect my thoughts and sleep off the shrooms. But I continued to trip throughout the night, envisioning a woman who said I was transforming into a squid. She said she had saved me before and was here to save me once again by halting my parasite from transforming me into a squid. I told her I'll need more help than that on account of my inability to fight anything. So she went on to explain that I had great potential within, but that I must accept and nurture my parasite and learn to wield it as I drifted off back to sleep. When morning came, Volo awoke me to warn me that Minthara had reappeared to raid the grove. After he apologized for permanently blinding me by gifting me a new eye, I had my patron teleport me back to the grove to evaluate the situation.
My, what manner of place is this? A path to redemption? Or a road to damnation? Hard to say, for your journey is just beginning.
Upon my return, I was immediately met by an arrow before Zevlor realized that it was just me and called me up to strategize a defense plan. The drow leader found the grove all by herself. I couldn't stop it. I'm sorry. Zevlor shared that he and the other refugees had already buried landmines outside the gate and that he planned to detonate them with fire arrows as the raiders arrived. Just as I was feeling hopeful that we could defend the grove, Minthara arrived. She's back! Minthara connected parasites to tell me to cross the refugees and throw open the gate.
Would that be villainous? Would that be crazy villain? Am I crazy if I do that? I don't know what I'm doing.
But Zevlor began to give an inspirational speech, and the paladin was highly persuasive.
I know that you are all afraid, but I also know that you have been fighting your whole lives. We have never been handed the easy choices or the gentle paths, and this is no different. These creatures would take our lives, our children, our future, and we must resist!
Thus, I sided with Zevlor to defend the grove.
Traitor! You think you can stand against me and the Absolute?
Watch me.
Dissect you.
Oh my god. Okay, at least we have crazy high ground.
Oh, fuck. Oh, the spiders can just jump up here. Oh, that's horrible. They can throw. As our enemies advanced, I tried setting up a cloud of darkness for cover, but things continued to get worse, causing me to decide my only option was to disappear into my cloud of darkness and retreat further into the grove for backup. So I ran for the druids, only to find one of the refugee children grunting at the door. I called out for help, but the druids refused to let us inside. Further in the grove, all the refugees were hiding.
Why didn't you guys help me at the gate? You're just standing here with an axe. Where's Goo? Where were all you guys?
After warning them to get out of here, I tried circling around the outside of the grove to retreat, where I came across a fallen man who carried his own parasite. Heeding the words of my dream visitor, I decided if I were to survive whatever was to come, it was now or never, and began to embrace my potential. But before I fled for good, I figured maybe I could at least get my hands on the druid's idol for the refugee child mole. The only issue was that the druids had apparently squirreled the idol away inside their sanctum, locking it inside with them. So I tried sneaking in through their back door I had noticed while speaking with Nettie earlier. only to find that they had considered that entrance and locked it as well. But I was able to use the necklace I found in Gut's chamber to teleport straight in.
I don't know if they're gonna attack me as soon as they see me in here. I very well may just die to the druids now.
I continued to sneak my way around the sanctuary, where I spotted the idol securely monitored in between all of the druids. So I leapt directly onto the table and snatched the idol. With the idol in hand, I made a mad dash away from the hostile druids back towards the secret exit.
Karlach disapproves of what?
After teleporting back out, I tried flanking the evil raiders as a last-ditch effort, only to see that Minthara must have approved of my theft of the idol. I realized because I stole the idol, I had accidentally aligned myself with Minthara and the cultists.
Well, I guess I'm one of the bad guys now, huh?
So I decided even evil allies were better than no allies.
At least someone's my friend.
In an attempt to make amends with the refugees, I tried to bring the idol to Mole, but she apparently hated me too much to even speak with me, refusing to give me the powerful ring. So I returned to the raid, where I found the druids had now emerged to reclaim their idol. After baiting the druids over to my cultist allies with cats, the raid commenced. Backed by an army of cultists, we eliminated the druids, but Minthara still wouldn't speak, demanding to eliminate the survivors. But even after doing Minthara's dirty work, she still wouldn't speak, apparently overwhelmed from the bloodshed. So I returned to camp, only for my wife Karlach to lead me on top of everything.
Okay.
Seeking guidance for my next move, I turned in for sleep to meet with my dream visitor.
I see you've been using the powers the tadpole gives you. Good.
She instructed me to find the source of the parasite infections and explained that those infected with parasites hear the voice of the Absolute and believe it to be a god. Further, the infected had formed an entire cult around the Absolute, and the higher ranked among the infected are known as true souls. However, she warned me that once the Absolute gives the order, all those who are infected will transform into squids. After sharing that she too was infected with a parasite, she suggested that I follow the cultist trail to infiltrate the cult and destroy the source of their magic. So after getting some sleep, I returned to Minthara to lead me deeper into this cult, but she had apparently stood in place all night long, wired and ready for battle. Since Minthara had apparently begun to lose her mind, I set my sights on the evil dwarfs back in the Underdark for answers. The only issue was that there were still dwarfs patrolling the lake, preventing me from crossing. So I chugged a jumping potion to sneak in and throw them into the lake. But I had an important realization. It appears dwarfs can't swim. Armed with a viable combat method, I stole their boat and set off for the ruins beyond the lake. But before I made it, another boat full of dwarfs pulled up on me. I decided now may not be the time for my new combat method, as I couldn't throw all 5 in at once. Thus, I lied to the dwarf that I was simply seeking to return the shoes the gnome gifted me to their commander. The dwarf bought my explanation, guiding me to the ruins. Upon my arrival, I approached the leader of the evil dwarfs to see that they were linked with the cult of the Absolute. Seeking to infiltrate, I asked what I could do and was told another true soul had been trapped by a rockfall. She asked me to help free him, and if I did, I would be looked upon favorably by the Absolute. So I set off to search for a means to clear the rubble, only to find the gnome I had saved back in the rundown village, Barkus. Barkus told me the cultists had taken his brother Wolbrin to their headquarters, Moonrise Towers. Barkus offered to join my camp and give me directions to Moonrise Towers. The only problem was that he was currently enslaved. So I made my way over to the slaver dwarfs to try and purchase Barkus with my monopoly money. But instead, I gathered that there was disagreement among the dwarfs. Apparently, the gnome slaver dwarfs were not exactly friends with the cultist dwarfs. So I reached an agreement with one of the slaver dwarfs that if I helped them take care of the cultists, they would free the gnomes. Thus, I proceeded to make my way around the ruins, throwing all the cultist dwarfs into the lake before using some explosives I found to free the true soul, Nier. With the help of the slave drivers, we made short work of Nier, allowing me to claim his shoes along with Barkus to lead me to Moonrise Towers. But before heading towards the cultists' headquarters, I decided I was going to need some stronger gear. So after narrowly escaping some animated armor armors, I proceeded around the ruins where I spotted a legendary forge with everything I would need to craft some gear in the immediate area. But as I went to craft some gear, a giant robot meant to guard the forge came out of the lava valve. Luckily for me, even giant robots like cats, so I was able to lure it into position to crush it with the forge's hammer. I then descended to get a powerful new set of armor and shield. Before proceeding on the perilous path to Moonrise Towers, I decided it's probably a safer bet to first try following up on the potential cure that Lae'zel had mentioned earlier. So after using my Monopoly money to hire some bodyguards, I proceeded towards Lae'zel's people in the mountains. But as I approached the mountains, a frog swooped in on a dragon to block the path forward. Lae'zel herself emerged from the wilderness, and I approached only to hear the lead frog mention a relic that sounded exactly like the one Shadowheart had used to protect me from the voices. Lae'zel shared that she was infected on the Nautiloid, causing the lead frog to sick the entire frog squad on us before flying off on his dragon. I immediately called to my bodyguards before enshrouding myself in a cloud of darkness and cursing their leader. The frogs immediately shot Lae'zel and started brawling with my bodyguards. The frogs even tried going invisible, but Lumpty and Lighten was able to see through their tricks. From my cloud, I was able to blast one of the frogs, but they were quick to take out my guards. Just as I was about to run, I learned that frogs are terrified of the dark. So I stuck to my cloud, and slowly but surely, I was able to eliminate the frog squad. On their leader, I located a magic slate that revealed there was a frog refuge within a temple in the mountains. Further, the slate revealed the frog's purpose was to collect our relic for their queen. After pocketing the slate and reviving Lae'zel with her own scroll, I proceeded into the mountains in search of the frog refuge. On the way, I crossed paths with a bird that asked for help with reclaiming his nest from some eagles. Feeling confident after defeating the frogs, I agreed to help, but I quickly learned that eagles are not afraid of the dark. After narrowly escaping being pecked to death by eagles, I proceeded through the temple until I found the frog refuge. I tried asking for help to cure me, but I was not very persuasive, causing the frogs to jump me. So I set up my darkness cloud again, confident that frogs are afraid of the dark. But apparently these frogs were not afraid of the dark, shooting and rending my psyche straight through my cloud, breaking my concentration. So I quickly teleported away and made a break for the exit, allowing me to come up with an alternate plan. Since persuasion failed, plan B would be deception. Thus, I disguised myself as a frog, scaled down the mountainside, and broke in through the back door. I entered and lied to more frogs. I simply seek to meet more of my kin. It's been too long, granting me unrestricted access to the refuge. After using more Monopoly money to buy a new set of gloves, I proceeded to the medical wing to cure my parasite. The doctor directed me to lie down for treatment, and after using my magic staff from the Shroom Tower to bless myself, I lied down. The chair began to obliterate my tadpole, subjecting me to excruciating pain. But with some inspiration and some help from my patron, I was able to maintain my mind. But just as I was about to be cured, my dream visitor blew up the chair. As I got my bearings, I sensed my parasite was stronger than ever, empowering me. Although the doctor confronted me for an explanation, I was able to lie my way out of the situation. You're wrong, the parasite is dead and I felt it die, but on my way out, I accidentally stole something, forcing me to boom my way out. For calling in Scratch to walk off the headache with me, I tried reporting the damage to the supervisor frog, explaining that my relic blew up the chair. The frogs seemed to be fine with the damage to their medical equipment and loss of their only doctor, instead taking a particular interest in my relic. She told me to bring it to her supervisor, who immediately demanded I turn it over. Here's how deals like this work. I have something you need. I can bargain all I like.
What would you ask of an Inquisitor?
Give me a treasure from the Githyanki Empire's coffers, one of immense power.
A fool's request. Denied.
Unable to reach a deal, I turned to head out, only for the Frog Queen herself to appear. My patron warned me to be cautious, so I told the Frog Queen I was just here looking to cure my parasite. After pondering for a moment, the Frog Queen explained that the relic was compromised by an agent of the Squid's Grand Design and asked me to eliminate the one inside. She went on to warn me not to trust the one inside who would try to appeal to my trust. With all my previous failed attempts at persuasion in mind and surrounded by war frogs, I agreed to enter the prison. Thus, I entered the prison where I was able to meet my dream visitor in the flesh. I asked why she prevented the frog chair from obliterating my parasite, to which she replied it would have obliterated me. But I was skeptical, so I tried to probe her mind for the truth.
Must you, really? If you were going to do it, at least you could have tried harder than that.
To appeal to my trust, my dream visitor then spawned in a knife and took a knee. But I told her to put the knife away, explaining that I was simply lying to the frogs as an act of self-preservation. My dream visitor went on to explain that the frogs wanted her dead because she stole their powers, and it was these same powers that she used to protect me from the voice of the Absolute transforming me into a squid. After telling me that I'm on the right path going to Moonrise Towers, she warned me that the frogs will attack me when I leave before giving me her blessing. In anticipation of the incoming frog attack, I threw down an invisibility potion on myself and Scratch so we could slip out undetected, only to be immediately detected by the frogs. I tried telling the frogs that their queen's a liar, so they called me a liar. As I tried to make a break for it, the frogs jumped my dog. Oh, you mother... It's like that? You kill my dog? For taking out Scratch, I decided I couldn't just run. The frogs had to die. So I escaped into a hidden chamber I had read about while exploring the temple above the frog refuge. I continued through the secret path until I found a sacred weapon which my patron warned me not to grab. So I grabbed the weapon, triggering a self-destruct sequence from an ancient weapon built by the previous occupants of the temple. Although the defenses entrapped me in a cage, I was able to teleport out and exit through an escape portal, flying away from the temple safely. Just as I made it clear of the danger zone, the weapon fired off, obliterating the temple and taking all of the frogs with it. But as I returned to camp, I found Scratch had apparently teleported out himself and made it back in one piece.
Oh, Scratch is here! Oh, Scratch is fine.
Hope you're keeping well, friend.
Scratch is coming with us!
With Scratch safe and sound in camp, I proceeded towards Moonrise Towers. To ward off the darkness of the environment, I conjured a flame to illuminate my surroundings. As I made my way towards Moonrise Towers, I crossed paths with friendly adventurers known as Harpers. Just as we were getting acquainted with one another, shadows began to encroach. One of the Harpers was claimed by the shadows, which possessed him to attack his own comrades. Although most of my new allies fell, I kept blasting and booming until the shadows were dispelled. Once the noise settled, the sole survivor of the Harpers invited me to their camp nearby, where the shadows couldn't reach. So I followed the dwarf, but immediately upon my arrival, the camp cougar ensnared me with her vines, identifying me as an evil cultist true soul due to my parasite infection. But before things could escalate, a man came forward, secretly revealing himself as a true soul, before saying that I helped him fight cultists a while back. The cougar demanded an explanation as to how I could be infected yet not a mindless cultist, so I showed her my frog relic. Once the cougar calmed down, we reached common ground, as we both had an interest in assaulting Moonrise Towers. The only issue was that the surrounding lands were enveloped in even more dangerous shadows, and my conjured flame wouldn't be enough. Nevertheless, the cougar invited me to use their camp as a safe haven while I plotted a way to infiltrate the cult, so I made sure to purchase a new cloak using my Monopoly money. After I finished shopping, I heard some nearby Harpers mention that they had a lead on a cultist convoy that had figured out a way to navigate the shadows. So I set off with the Harpers to look into this convoy, where we came upon a menacing-looking man-spider carrying a lantern that appeared to ward off the shadows. I took lead, using my parasite to trick the man-spider into believing I was a cultist true soul. With a bit of luck, I was able to talk him into handing over the lantern, and with even more luck, I was able to talk the entire convoy into walking off into the shadows. As the convoy disappeared into the darkness, I examined the lantern, which seemed to be powered by a live pixie. So I freed the pixie, who showed her appreciation by blessing me with immunity to the shadow curse, along with a bell to call her anytime I needed her protection. Protected by the blessing of the pixie, I proceeded towards Moonrise Towers, pushing a toll troll out a window to her doom to clear my way forward. After looting a new set of gloves from the toll troll's collection, I noticed the cultist convoy ahead fall into the curse. Luckily, however, they had lost their minds, allowing me to freely blast them from the roof of the toll house with no issue. With the convoy taken care of for good, I continued into Moonrise Towers, where I immediately made use of my Monopoly money. From the cultists, I grabbed a couple new rings, a new shield, a new hat, and some potent sleep syrup. Once I finished scamming the cultists for all their gear, I proceeded further in, where I found that Minthara must have regained her senses and made her way here, along with Saza. Despite her eliminating the grove, the leader of the cult, Ketherick Thorm, was not pleased that she failed to return with our frog relic. Minthara tried to enter an insanity plea, which Ketherick denied, sentencing Minthara to death. As Ketherick sent Minthara to the dungeons, one of the goblins stepped up in defiance, snatching a weapon from a guard to impale Ketherick. But Ketherick survived the attack and began to walk down the goblin.
Try again.
Although the goblin landed another fatal blow, Ketherick brushed it off, responding with a slam of his own. As Ketherick headed upstairs, his second-in-command Zarel tasked me with taking care of the remaining goblins. But since Saza had initially helped me get behind enemy lines, I let them live as I headed to the dungeons to try and rescue Minthara. To avoid raising any alarms, I began to launch all of the prison guards into a bottomless pit. Once the coast was clear, I was able to successfully locate Minthara, whose mental state was continuing to worsen. But using my parasite, I was able to enter and at least temporarily repair her psyche. Now, we just had to find a way to get out of here alive. So I started booming, and Minthara started punching on the gnomes. Although the gnomes kept trying to confuse us, Minthara kept swinging straight.
Beat her ass, Minthara!
As we clear her captors, Minthara thanked me for saving her as we made our way around the prison where we found Barkis's brother Wolbrin. To repay Barkis for guiding me to Moonrise Towers, I recovered Wolbrin's tools and brought them to him. Wolbrin then used his hammer to blast through a wall, opening our way to an escape boat that we used to safely return to Last Light Inn. Once we were safe, I guided Minthara back to our camp to have Shadowheart repair her brain as I returned to Moonrise Towers to continue my infiltration mission. Considering how I handled the convoy, my first plan of attack was to talk the cultists into walking into the shadows. Although I found limited success, the plan almost cost me my life. Oh my god. After narrowly escaping, I decided I had to come up with another plan. So I went to Zarel to see what information I could gather on the cult and Kethric's invincibility. Zarel informed me that Kethric's most trusted advisor, Balthazar, was off on a mission to retrieve an important relic from Kethric's family mausoleum. So Zarel tasked me with heading over to support Balthazar. But considering how my last fight went, I decided to make my way around the town to try and make some allies. At this point, however, I was getting quite good at talking my way through danger. The sisters aren't ready, they'll make me sick. Even turning those I encountered against one another. Very soothing. But my talking method still wasn't entirely consistent, leading me to get chased around by the townspeople. What a POV here. After escaping the bartender, I was getting sick of being too weak to fight head-on, and I knew I couldn't keep running forever. So I decided it was time to come up with a plan that would allow me to finally stand and fight.
You should be more careful who you listen to. Retreat begets regret. Always. See you soon.
Therefore, I returned to camp to plan, only to see Shadowheart misunderstood the assignment and furthered Minthara's mental breakdown. Indeed, Shadowheart had caused Minthara to completely lose her mind and transform into a spider, but she now had the ability to communicate with forest creatures. So Minthara called in a dryad, who called in a woodwoad who we mugged for their weapons. But these powerful weapons were just my tools, and would be nothing without the right mindset to guide their destruction. So I took up a divine oath to be the good guy and fight evil, granting me the power to smite my enemies. To take things even further beyond, I prayed to Sharan altars, receiving even more divine blessings. With my new powers, I returned to help those I couldn't before. First, I took care of the rest of the evil dwarfs from the Underdark, receiving yet another blessing from the shrooms. At this point, I was really enjoying the power and set off for my own revenge against the armadillo that jumped me. God damn! And then Glut for getting me attacked by the beach dwarves. But somewhere along the line, I may have gotten a bit too power hungry and found myself breaking into the lair of my steroid dealer for even more power. My dealer caught me sneaking around her basement, and although she was no match for my new powers, she confronted me with a tough decision.
I'm an expert on deals, no funny business.
My offer will put that little pact of yours to shame. Let me leave with the girl, and I'll give you power.
I had to choose to either save an innocent pregnant girl or have a piece of her hair that would make me slightly more charismatic. So I tried talking my dealer into releasing the girl, but I was not persuasive enough. Yet. Thus, I chose the hair, so this wouldn't happen again. But my power trip started catching up with me, and letting my steroid dealer take the innocent pregnant girl broke my divine oath. Subsequently, a knight called me back to my camp to talk about the consequences of my actions.
You swore to maintain order, to preserve the tenets of civilization itself, and stand as a bulwark against those who sought to tear it down.
It's just got a piece of hair, dude. The knight explained he had formerly served a revered cat pastor, but the two had reached a fundamental disagreement, with the knight accusing his pastor patron of being greedy based on the excessive price of the pastor's material goods. As such, the knight slayed his patron, becoming the original Oathbreaker paladin. Consequently, he was transformed into a cat, while a portion of his soul was cleaved from his cat body to animate this suit of armor that appears to all other paladins who break their oath. Regardless, the knight explained that an Oathbreaker wields their own darker powers for whatever reason they see fit. So I decided to become an Oathbreaker, telling myself that I would use my powers for good. With my new powers and sleep syrup, I returned to slay the entire goblin camp.
He's back. Get back down there.
The gnolls that had previously cornered me inside the toll house.
Where's this guy? That guy's under the ground.
And anyone else that stood in my way. After blazing my warpath, I returned to the Thorn family mausoleum in search of Balthazar. But as I approached, my patron appeared to warn me to be careful.
Listen here, Pipsqueak.
Raphael shared that this was more than a family mausoleum. It was an underground temple dedicated to Shar worship, and also the home of another devil that he had scammed.
Do not underestimate this opponent. At best, you will have the blink of an eye to strike. Strike first, strike true, defy the odds, for they are distinctly in its favor. That much I owe the bastard to concede.
With his warnings in mind, I continued inside where I found Balthazar had hid away from undead shards. So I cracked the lock on his door, forcing him to back me up. But as Balthazar started shooting off rays of sickness, I had a flashback to my previous life, where Balthazar hid like a coward and left me to fight the Sharans alone. So this time, I decided to leave Balthazar, and made my way around his room, looting everything of value before blasting down another of his doors to thieve even more power with the help of my patron. Just as I looked back to see how Balthazar was doing, his brother Flesh squashed him. With Balthazar flattened, I blasted my way through the remaining undead and continued searching for anything of value. But as I approached a shiny rock, the devil my patron had warned me about, Yrgir, started to serenade me. Surrounded by his 8 sons, I decided even my newfound powers may not be enough, so I resorted instead to my tried and true talking method. Although I was able to convince his sons to turn on each other, I was not as successful when I tried having Yrgir attack his dog. So Yrgir started shooting at me, forcing me to retreat and guzzle some sleep syrup. The only issue was that he was guarding a very shiny rock that I wanted to get my hands on, so I circled around and diverted his attention with a cat. As Yrgir looked the other way, I snuck up behind him and summoned illusory copies of myself to throw him off. I immediately started booming him before using my squid abilities to give him stage fright, making him too scared to sing. Before he could react, I clubbed him again, cursing him. Although Yrgir tried to shroud himself and run away, my booming blade revealed him. His dog tried coming to his aid, but I was able to run down and smite Yrgir before turning to curse and boom his dog. As I took his shiny rock back to camp, Shadowheart chimed in, asking if she could check out the temple.
I don't have to explain myself to you.
You've been keeping secrets from me. Is helping you in my best interest?
We can discuss your hurt feelings later. If we want to make progress in this place, we have to do the trials. If I prove myself to Lady Shah, she'll bless me with power. Power we can use to take on the Absolute and rid ourselves of these parasites once and for all. Let's explore. If nothing else, you can at least soak up any arrows that are loosed at us.
So I made my way through the temple, collecting more shiny rocks and eventually the spear Shadowheart was looking for. After getting Shadowheart the spear, she asked if we could go down a questionable elevator that led into the temple's inner sanctum. But upon entering, Shadowheart began to pray to a Sharan statue.
Lady Shar? You worship her?
Shut the f*** up.
I'm amazed you missed the signs, honestly.
Despite her inability to swim, her goddess asked her to descend into the waters. So Shadowheart decided to double down and face her fears as a wolf. For saving my life back in the goblin camp, I descended with Shadowheart, who led me to a woman.
Her fate is mine to seal. Let me handle this.
So I stayed out of things, trusting Shadowheart, but things continued to escalate between the two, so I thought perhaps I should step in.
Don't do it, Shadowheart. Shadowheart doesn't trust me. Why? I'm gonna stay out of this. She doesn't kill her anyway.
Oh shit! As night song fell, Shadowheart's goddess Shar herself spoke out that Ketheric Thorm was now vulnerable.
Finally! Through me, her will is enacted. Her shadows strengthen and the darkness takes all. I am her chosen!
Despite my good intentions, Shadowheart's sacrifice of the woman caused the fall of Last Light in.
I didn't know this would happen.
It matters little either way. Lady Shah claims everything in the end. Last Light is a testament to that.
So now, the only living things remaining outside our camp were the inhabitants of Moonrise Towers and Ketheric Thorm himself, and now was the time to change that. So I made my way back to Moonrise Towers, where I encountered the last of the cultist defenses. But on my warpath for power, I systematically kidnapped each cultist and eliminated them by isolating, cheap-shotting, lying,
someone cast a spell on me, they're the one you should be hunting down,
and cheap-shotting them again as they tried walking away. So now the only thing standing in my way were 3 level 1 goblins and my sleep syrup dealer. After blasting the cultist out of my way, I ascended the tower to meet Ketheric Thorm himself, who is now isolated because I had also launched an attack on his minions while on my sleep syrup fueled warpath. And Ketheric knew he was no match for someone that could cause such destruction in the matter of a single day and tried to submit. But I wanted to test my powers and challenged Ketheric to stand and fight. So Ketheric began to summon minions and I responded by enshrouding myself in darkness. After obliterating his dog when it tried to run from me, Ketheric ran into my cloud trying to smite me.
Dog just ate the— oh, damn, Ketheric runs— oh my god.
Holy sh! After dodging Kethric's strongest attacks, I blasted him until he waved the white flag and called out to a giant tentacle to retreat. But I wasn't letting him get away that easy and chased him down into his getaway hole. Underneath Moonrise Towers, I found myself in what my dream visitor identified as a squid colony, the origin of the squid parasite infections. After purging a group of soldiers that left me for dead when I was too weak to fight, I saved an innocent brain dog. I continued clearing my way through the colony's inhabitants until I found a brain that I inserted into a pedestal next to a disembodied head. The brain linked with the head, who shared that they were originally a frog before asking to purge them too, and in exchange would give me even more power. So I obliged the frog's request, receiving the power to resist squid influence. With my powers, I continued to descend even deeper into the colony until I found Ketheric Thorm. But Ketheric wasn't alone, and appeared to be accompanied by two others that I gathered to be the two remaining Chosen of the Absolute. Before I could act, the three Chosen used their magic rocks to call upon a giant brain which infected the supreme leader of Baldur's Gate's entire military force.
You're supposed to be the fearsome general come to conquer the city, and I am the hero who will save it.
The two other Chosen set off with the brain towards the city of Baldur's Gate. I stepped forward to confront Ketheric. Ketheric boasted that he had resorted to the worship of the god of the dead, Merkel. In exchange for resurrecting his daughter Isabel, Ketheric was to grow the cult of the Absolute, then cross the other two, Orin and Gortash, to take control for his god. So I tried explaining to Ketheric that Isabel was one of the few people I had in fact not eliminated on my warpath, despite her trying to attack me.
What? How did this happen?
I didn't even mean to side with him. She's making them slip.
Oh! That thing just killed the cat!
Regardless, Ketheric said it was too far gone at this point, instigating a fight. I immediately targeted the Mind Flayer, eliminating it before it could move, before repositioning to a platform on the opposite side of the room. From the safety of my platform, I summoned a cloud of darkness to hide in while I blasted Ketheric's minions. My only issue was Ketheric's terrifying smites, so I summoned some Ice Imps from Ketheric to valiantly tank the smites. But the methods fell quickly, so I decided it was time to call in the Mud Tank. Once Ketheric spent all of his smites swinging at my Mud Mountain, I summoned illusory copies of myself before clearing the room of his minions and circling around to blast Ketheric. But as Ketheric fell into the brain juices, he arose in the form of the dead god himself. So I summoned another darkness cloud directly on the Reaper, blinding him and obscuring myself for safety as I downed a bottle full of stimulants. Now it was time to start booming, causing the Reaper to stare me down, but I met his gaze with fire. After whiffing a couple more swings, I cursed the Reaper as he cleaved my Mud Tank. While undead minions advanced, I summoned another Mud Tank as I continued swinging. But things got dicey as I went lethargic from my stimulants wearing off. The minions began to sacrifice themselves to heal the Reaper, and although he tried his best, my Mud Tank just couldn't land a hit. Once I recovered, I landed a smite, causing the Reaper to stare me down again, making me whiff. But I wasn't finished yet, downing more stimulants to swing again, only for the Reaper to narrowly survive. My Mud Tank gave it his all, clawing the Reaper for 2 damage, but the minions continued to move in to play medic. I kept swinging, getting stared down in the process, but this time I lost my concentration on my protective cloud of darkness. At this point, it was all or nothing, so I went all in, smiting the Reaper. As death fell, Ketheric reappeared, only to burst into flames, conveniently leaving his magic rock behind. As I looted his rock, my dream visitor appeared. She went on to reveal that the big brain that just flew off for the city was the Absolute itself, the source of the voices heard by the infected. She reasoned that the brain must be controlled by its crown, which was then controlled by the rocks wielded by the 3 Chosen. She seemed to recognize one of the Chosen as Gortash, a worshipper of Bane, the god of tyranny, and figured the other, Orin, must worship Baal, the god of murder. As such, the Absolute was merely a front for the 3 gods of death, and our real enemies are the Chosen of the Dead 3. So she said I had to get to the city of Baldur's Gate immediately to take out the remaining 2 Chosen before they could command the brain to transform the infected into squids. After taking care of some more frogs that tried ambushing me as I left, I set off for the city of Baldur's Gate. Since I hadn't had a full night's rest since Minthara raided the Grove, I figured some sleep was long overdue. But in the middle of the night, the voice of the big brain snapped me out of my slumber. My frog relic came alive, protecting me from the voices as as it opened a portal through which another group of frogs leapt into my camp. As I got my bearings, I called a timeout to empty my entire inventory since my steroids wore off and I was now too weak to carry my belongings. After lightening my pack, I rushed past the frogs into the portal where I found even more frogs attacking a regal squid who revealed he was my dream visitor. Although the frogs nearly took us out, I was able to throw some into the void, set up a darkness cloud, and blast them away, rescuing the squid. Squid was quick to subdue the last remaining frog as he began to share his backstory. He shared that he had initially been infected like me in a squid colony beneath Moonrise Towers. After being transformed, Squid returned to Baldur's Gate, where he used his newly acquired mind control powers to head the largest mercantile operation at Baldur's Gate. But the mastermind behind the Absolute, Gortash, found and exposed Squid and brought him back to the Big Brain. Gortash then used his rock to command the brain to send Squid to retrieve our prism since it contained the Frog Prince, who has the unique power to disrupt the voice of the Big Brain. So Gortash wanted the prism for himself to ensure no one else could use the power of the Frog Prince to resist his control and thwart his plans. However, once Squid found the Frog Prince, he began to regain his free will. Squid then hid inside the relic until Shadowheart retrieved it on the Nautiloid and ultimately met with me outside the Goblin camp. Just as I began to question in my mind why Squid appeared to me as a woman, he offered me even more power in the form of a special squid tadpole. So I decided to let the catfishing slide for now and ate the tadpole to acquire even greater powers. After finally getting some rest, I set off into the outskirts of Baldur's Gate. Upon my arrival, I made my way around town to con a con man for a new bow and used more of my Monopoly money to support the local carnival.
Oh, hungry little hobgoblin. Want a treat-o?
I'm not even a hobgoblin. As I made my way around the carnival, I was called out by a clown to help him with his show. Considering his shadow-cursed dog, I decided not to take the stage. So the clown called up an innocent man in my place and shockingly commanded his cursed dog to attack the man. So I sprung into action to take down the evil clown. But somewhere along the way, my power-hungry instincts took over and I boomed the carnival organizer for a set of gloves. After I finished crashing the carnival, I heard screaming coming from a nearby windmill. So I rushed in, only to find a newborn squid. Once I neutralized the threat, Squid suggested I eat its brain for even more power. So I followed his advice. After devouring the brain, I began to have visions of even more powerful gear. So I followed my visions, which led me underneath Gortash's fortress to collect the legendary hat from behind the corpse of a dead dragon. With my new hat, I ascended the fortress to confront Gortash. But before I could attack him, Gortash proposed that we swear a divine oath not to harm each other, an ally to command the brain together. Together, we would become the Absolute and wield the power to command all those who were infected. That level of power certainly piqued my interest, so I gave him my oath as an Oathbreaker Paladin, forming an unbreakable alliance. Our only issue was that Orin held the other rock that we would need. Thus, I agreed to use my squid powers to seek and destroy Orin and claim her rock. With that, Gortash commanded the supreme leader of Baldur's Gate's military to inaugurate himself as the Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate, the head of the city. But before Gortash could return to his office, I rushed in myself to steal his shoes before proceeding into the lower city of Baldur's Gate in search of Orin. To make sure I was ready for whatever was to come, I made my way around town to purchase a new set of armor. But as I returned to camp to dye my new gear, Shadowheart pulled me aside.
This hairstyle is closer to Lady Shah's own image. I did it to honor her. What do you think?
You're wearing a helmet. Shadowheart shared that her goddess tasked her with eliminating the leader of the nearby Sharan church, Viconia Devere, for defying her will. In exchange, her goddess offered to grant us more power, so I accepted and we set off to hunt some fake Sharans. Upon our arrival, we were escorted to the back rooms, where Shadowheart was met by a projection of Viconia herself. Shadowheart recognized Viconia as her mother superior, the woman who raised her, wiped her memories, and initially sent her off on her mission to retrieve the frog relic. But now, Shadowheart recognized Viconia as nothing but an obstacle to her faith, and further powers to be granted by Shar. Sensing things were about to get ugly, I sent Shadowheart back to camp and sent a mud tank into the congregation to start slinging mud. As the Sharans rushed my mud tank, I concentrated on raising a wall of fire in their path. To keep them from escaping the fire, I used my squid abilities to hold them in place. As the congregation slowly burned, I called in storms of ice to set up a slippery surface inside the fire. To play things extra safe, my mud tank blocked the top of the stairs for any Sharans that made it that far. For the ones that did, I continued to use my squid abilities to send them tumbling back down the stairs in ice storms until I was able to isolate and blast the remaining survivors. After incinerating the congregation, Shadowheart returned to guide me into the depths of the Sharan cloister. There, we came upon two people that seemed to be linked to the wound in Shadowheart's hand. Shadowheart was suddenly brought to her knees in a bout of pain, and in that moment, her goddess Shar appeared before us. Shar explained that the two were amongst her goddess sister Seluna's most devout followers, and that their suffering was the source of Shadowheart's powers. Further, Shar decided to restore Shadowheart's memories from when the Sharans saved her from a wolf and took her in. But that wasn't the full story. The wolf from the past was her father. She was abducted by the Sharans, and her two parents were now captive prisoners bound by Shar. With that, Shar gave Shadowheart her final step to realizing her faith. Shadowheart was given the choice of snuffing out her parents, her last tie to her former life. But if she complied, Shar would take her memories, healing her through loss so she could be her right hand. So I told Shadowheart to do whatever she felt was right.
Do what's right. I think I lost sight of that some time ago. Better to just serve blindly.
We love you all the same.
We never stopped. Thank you, Moon Maiden. You let me see my Genevieve, my baby girl, one last time.
Don't call me that. My name is Shadowheart.
You are just lost, Genevieve. Seluna will show you the way home, in time.
My name is Shadowheart!
Following the loss of her parents, Shar wiped her memories, and Shadowheart rose as her chosen.
That's crazy! What the fuck? She has killed her parents! What the fuck, Shadowheart?
After Shadowheart reassured me that she at least remembers everything we had been through, she led me to a mirror that temporarily gave me dementia. But more importantly, the mirror made me even more charismatic. After forgetting about all the atrocities I had committed this run, I took my oath to fight evil back up, and headed for the local tavern to sleep off the dementia. I gathered from the tavern keeper that Duke Stellmain was recently murdered upstairs. As such, we were allowed to stay here for free to show others it was safe. But before blindly heading to sleep, I decided it was probably best to check out the crime scene myself. The investigator on the scene, Devella, shared that Stellmain had been paralyzed and had her hand cut off. Interestingly, however, there were similarly mutilated corpses all over the city, and the brutality suggested it was part of a larger plot orchestrated by the murder cult of Baal. So I agreed to look into the Baalist resurgence, thinking this could be my lead to finding Orin. With that, I turned in for some sleep. But in the middle of the night, Squid woke me up to show off how well he was holding the Frog Prince hostage. However, Squid shared that he was feeling distracted by memories of Stellmain, as she was the one he mind-controlled to lead the largest mercantile operation of Baldur's Gate. For interrupting my sleep, I squeezed his hand as hard as I could. Squid received the message and agreed to stop interrupting my sleep, allowing me to get some rest. The morning came, I was met by the warlock that saved me way back in the Goblin camp, Corilla. She told me that our patron wished to speak in the nearby brothel to offer even more power. Raphael enlightened me that I already held the key to destroying the big brain in the palm of my hand, in the form of the Frog Prince. The only thing in the way were the binds that held the prince in place. So Raphael offered me the means to break these chains, his Orphic hammer, assuring me that the prince would aid me in the war against the brain. I responded I didn't need the hammer, since I already agreed to ally with the city's president Gortash to command the brain together, not destroy it.
If I'd realized you were so gullible, I'd have tricked you into selling your soul for a pocketful of beans when we first met.
What kind of beans? Raphael then offered his proposal. In exchange for giving me his hammer to break the Frog Prince free, he requested that I give him the crown atop the brain when the time came. He explained that the crown was imbued with all the powers of magic, and any who wore it would become a god. Although the crown had destroyed its original creator Karsus, Raphael claimed that he could wield its powers to become the Archdevil Supreme of the Nine Hells. That amount of power certainly interested me. So I asked, what if I control the crown myself? You think you're funny? What are you laughing at?
Oh, I'm sorry, you were serious? The crown has laid low all who attempt to harness its power. Archwizards, emperors, gods. It would tear you apart.
Despite my patron not believing in me, I left as I set my sights on claiming the powers of the crown for myself. As I was leaving the brothel, I bumped into another investigator that was supposed to be looking into the Baldur murders. Although the investigator rudely dismissed me, I gathered that a local priest had been murdered, so I headed over to the scene. Upon my arrival, I simply asked the deceased priest who had murdered him, and he responded it was a dwarf dressed in red before directing me to check out the tunnels beneath the temple. So I descended through the tunnels, only to be attacked by shapeshifters. I was able to blast them away, and afterwards, I gathered from one of them that the dwarf that was responsible for the murders went by the name Baldur. So after briefly stopping by the greatest merchant in Baldur's Gate for a re-up on my steroid supply,
What do you need?
What do you need? I set off for the city in search of this murderous dwarf, but on our way to the city, the cougar caught up with us. The cougar asked for help to find an old friend, and since I accidentally helped Shadowheart doom her in, I felt that I owed her. So the cougar led me to the Thieves Guild in search of information from their leader Ninefingers pertaining to her friend. But as the two were talking, I noticed a bugbear tending the bar that was the spitting image of my old sleep syrup supplier. So I approached to see if he had any similar substances, only to find that this bugbear dealt in narcotics. Although I had retaken my oath to fight evil, I decided keeping the narcotics in my back pocket couldn't hurt, and that I would not get addicted. Thus, I used my Monopoly money to buy his entire supply, and as the cougar set off to find her friend, I set off for the local library to read up on the crown. I arrived to find the keeper of the books about to blast a gnome, so I sprang into action to fight evil. I rolled on a cloud of darkness and began to swing on one of the myrmidons before using my squid powers to pull them into my cloud as the evil wizard started powering up. I kept blasting, but as I went to use my squid powers again, the wizard retorted, breaking my concentration and nearly ending me. I began to frantically look for an escape route, but with the portal I entered through now closed, I decided to fly down onto a floating table away from all my enemies. But what I didn't anticipate was that all my enemies could also fly, and the myrmidons chased me down and started swinging. I dodged their attacks, only for the evil wizard himself to fly down and hurl a fireball at me. Engulfed by the flames, my life flashed before my eyes while the myrmidons moved in to surround me. But before they could finish me, I chugged an invisibility potion, allowing me to safely fly back up and protect myself with a globe of invulnerability. Where's my Terrasol? But in my panic state, I gave into temptation and began to rip narcotics to throw healing potions down in a desperate attempt to recover the situation. Although the myrmidons continued to move in and even started healing the evil wizard, I was able to use my squid powers to pull them out of my bubble. I then went on the offense, flying out to boom and blast them. As I flew back into my bubble, the withdrawals from my narcotics kicked in, but my bubble held. What is he doing? Why is this guy such a freak? I was able to recover to keep blasting before flying down to boom the final myrmidon, only for the evil wizard to tase me in the back of the neck. But his taser was no match for the narcotics in my bloodstream, allowing me to blast them away. After narrowly escaping with my newfound narcotics addiction, I made my way around the tower to gather all the knowledge I could on the crown. But as I left the tower to resume my investigation into the Baldur murders, I had a fateful encounter with the Oathbreaker cat, who unexpectedly offered the guidance I needed.
Destiny is a fickle mistress. She showers you in riches one day and kicks you in the gutter the next. But today, she smiles.
So I followed the words of wisdom offered by the Oathbreaker cat, descending into the gutter. There, Lae'zel came hopping over, warning me to run as Orin was right behind her. I told her I'd take the fight, only for Lae'zel to transform into Orin herself. Orin taunted that she was holding Lae'zel captive in her temple deeper in the sewers, but her real target was me. However, Orin's godball spoke to her, telling her that I must be sharpened further by eliminating Gortash. Orin then took on the form of Gortash as she went on to elaborate that she could not take him out herself, as she also swore an oath not to harm him. So Orin asked that I break my oath instead and assassinate Gortash to take his rock. After she transformed back, she proposed I would then bring the rocks to her sewer temple for a fight to the death, winner taking all the rocks for themselves. Considering this could be my chance to harness the power of the crown for myself, I agreed to the offer. So Orin directed me to weaken Gortash's defenses by taking out his giant robot factory in the lower city.
But listen close, bone killer. Step in my domain while the tyrant still sucks air, and I will carve your failure into your pretty plaything's skull.
After Orin teleported off, I headed towards Gortash's robot factory, only to see Volo had gotten himself back into trouble. So I tried sneaking over and released him, only for him to stand in place and get blasted away, drowning in the harbor. After avenging Volo, I made my way into Gortash's robot factory. I Upon entering, I was immediately attacked by all the workers, so I tried posting up on a catwalk, grabbing all the workers' attention by ripping narcotics and summoning a glowing globe of invulnerability. With even more stimulants, I was able to jitter my way through the encounter by sticking to my bubble, blasting away anybody that came close. Despite hearing a distant explosion come from the harbor, all my stimulants allowed me to keep focused as I kept blasting until I took all the workers out. As I proceeded into the heart of the foundry, vandalizing everything in the way, I was confronted by Gortash's magnum opus, the Steel Watcher Titan. I immediately used my squid abilities to start eating the Titan's brain while I set up a defensive darkness cloud to cover myself. For extra protection, I summoned an elemental to distract while I kept eating the Titan's brain. But surrounded by giant robots with debilitating crossbows, I ripped even more narcotics to boom on them before flying back into my darkness. While my elemental was able to take out one robot, the rest began to corner me. So I boomed my way out and flew off towards the exit as I finished devouring the Titan's brain. After eliminating the remaining robots, I returned to ask the single worker that didn't attack me, Xander Tubin, to help me shut down the factory. Xander was more than happy to help, since Gortash had taken the families of all the gnome workers to his underwater prison in the harbor as leverage to enslave the gnomes to build his giant robots. Tragically, however, the explosion I heard moments ago was Gortash blowing up this prison and the families of the enslaved workers I had just blasted on my stimulant-fueled rampage. Regardless, Xander blew up Gortash's robot factory for good. With Gortash's security taken care of, I reported back to Orin in the sewers for the next step in assassinating Gortash. Orin instructed me to climb the ranks of the Ballast Assassins, and to do so, I would have to take out the rising star Dolor, who was headed for the local wine festival to assassinate his next target.
You must kill him. Gore him like a pig prepped for the spit. Only then will you be sweet and sharp, ready for the murder lord's purpose.
But just as I located Dolor, he teleported away as his 4 brothers paralyzed me in place. After blasting Dolor's brothers, I started asking the nearby guards if they had seen a dwarf dressed in red, and gathered Dolor was last spotted heading inside a nearby shop, Facemaker's Boutique. So I rushed over, only to find the investigator from the Endavella had apparently found him first. But before Dolor could take out his target, I jumped in to stop him. Although Dolor tried to paralyze me and was accompanied by even more assassins who tried destroying the evidence, I was able to chug more stimulants, allowing me to blast and boom my competitors. As the assassins fell, Devella shook off her paralysis to share that the assassinations were part of a rite of initiation for aspiring ball cultists to prove their worth. Further, Devella explained that these aspiring assassins were to bring their victims' hands to a tribunal that was rumored to be underneath Candle Hollow's tombstones. So I agreed to look into this tribunal as I pocketed Dolor's bags of hands before heading for Candle Hollow's tombstones. After presenting the hands, I was granted access to stand before the leader of the tribunal, Saravok Anjev. Saravok gave me a hit list, and upon its completion, I would be a full-fledged unholy assassin of Baal, possessing the power to assassinate Gortash. But my hit list looked a lot different than Dolor's, consisting of Answer, the dragon I had walked past earlier to loot my hat, Cazador Zar, a vampire lord that was rumored to soon ascend to even greater powers, and ending with my own patron, Raphael. So I set off for the first on the list, Answer, to claim its hand as proof of its death. But as I went to collect his hand for the tribunal, the dragon arose, seeming to take particular interest in Squid. Luckily, Squid's presence distracted the dragon, allowing me to use my own Squid powers to mind blast him, stunning him in place. I then started blasting, only to realize I wasn't holding my clubs, so I flew out while the dragon was stunned. But before I reapproached, I called in my mud tank and brain dog, who was able to shoot the dragon and bait his lightning breath. I then came back and blasted before cursing the dragon. After avoiding a slam, I kept blasting as I attained a righteous clarity. The dragon began to claw at my mud tank before flying behind me, only to be blasted again, causing him to fly up in the air to gather power to nuke the whole area. But I had just enough time to hide behind some rocks to protect myself as the dragon let off his nuke. As the dragon landed, I flew into blast, causing the dragon to fly right back up to try and nuke us again. But this time, there were no rocks to duck behind, so I teleported back towards the exit alcove to take cover just as the dragon dropped his nuke. In storm settled, I flew back in, eliminating my first target. As I crossed Answer's name off my hit list, Squid appeared to explain that Answer was an old friend, and that he was the founder of Baldur's Gate. But Squid tired of building the city and set off for adventure, only to find himself in the Mind Flayer colony beneath Moonrise Towers. After being transformed into a squid, Answer found him and was able to bring him back to the city. But Answer was unable to cure Squid, so he offered him a peaceful death. Squid refused, instead giving Answer a not-so-peaceful death as an act of self-preservation. As thanks for listening to his lore, Squid teleported me into Cazador the Vampire Lord's lair so I could assassinate my next target. On my way to Cazador himself, I crossed paths with some of his vampire spawn and gathered that Cazador had been collecting thousands of peoples over the last several hundred years. Further, Cazador was planning to sacrifice the thousands of souls to ascend himself to attain even greater powers through an infernal ritual. But I had arrived just in time to put a stop to his ascension, so I started shooting off arrows of darkness to allow me to teleport over to Cazador's most threatening minion. But as I conjured illusory copies of myself and began to launch my attack, I found I had even more power than I anticipated.
What did I just do? What? Zombie Astarion? Captured Astarion and turned him... Oh, good God. That is horrible.
Uncertain of the extent of my own powers, I chugged some stimulants before enshrouding myself in darkness to fly over and blast them boom into Cazador. Cazador's minions then tried moving in to surround me. As bats flew in to bite me, clearing my illusory copies, the stink clouds began to overtake my darkness. But thanks to my unexplainable vampiric powers, I was able to clear some space for myself.
What did I just do? I cast Vampiric Swarm? How did I cast Vampiric Swarm?
After blasting more minions, I was then able to use my squid powers to pull the remaining enemies away from myself. Although my enemies kept trying to surround me, I was able to continue using my vampiric powers to protect myself.
What is that? How am I doing that?
With Cazador now isolated, I flew over and blasted them away. Cazador tried retreating to his sarcophagus to heal, but I was quick to chase him down.
This is for Astarion.
After assassinating my target, I tried using his staff to complete the infernal ritual to claim the powers for myself, but unfortunately it appeared my vampiric powers were now gone. So I instead set the 7,000 vampire spawn free on the city of Baldur's Gate as I used the staff to open a portal directly into my patron's home. I was immediately greeted by one of the residents, Hope, who offered to aid me if I could free her. So I descended into the prison to free Hope, setting up a baby bubble to play things safe. Although the jailers paralyzed me, leaving me wide open to being blasted and bitten, I was able to survive long enough to fight them off. But as I approached to free Hope, I noticed she was bound in place by the same chains as the Frog Prince. Hope said I would need to get the Orphic Hammer from the archive to break her chains. So I headed for the archive, only to stumble upon my patron who tried to seduce me as a last-ditch effort. But I wasn't falling for his tricks, and I told him I was here to assassinate him. My patron immediately called in 6 imps to try and hold me down as he chased me around his bedroom, but I was able to chug an invisibility potion to get some distance. While they searched the room for me, I launched my assault, booming my way through the imps as my patron tried chasing me down. But I was able to circle around the room to keep my distance, cursing my patron as he chased me into his bathtub. Knee-deep in the tub together, I turned the tables by trying to charm him instead, causing him to try running from me. But I wasn't letting him get away that easy and pulled him back into the tub with my squid powers to smite him. My patron desperately tried clawing me off him, but I wasn't letting up. So I charmed and boomed him before baiting him back into chasing me. But as he fell to my booming blade, I noticed I still had my warlock powers, only to realize that I had just assassinated my patron's body double. But his body double was carrying the key to Raphael's safe. Inside the safe, Raphael had concealed a note with a passphrase that would allow me to access the Orphic Hammer. So I pocketed the note and headed for the archive. After looting a new necklace, I spoke the passphrase, allowing me to steal a hammer. With the hammer in hand, I blasted my way through the residence as I made my way back to Hope, freeing her from her chains. Anticipating my patron's arrival, I threw down an invisibility potion and my stimulants in case of emergency. Just as I finished summoning illusory copies of myself and received a blessing from Hope, my patron returned home, accompanied by Hope's sister Corilla and Yurgir from back in the Shadowlands. While Hope chimed in to distract Raphael, with some inspiration, I was able to persuade Yurgir into joining our side. I told Raphael our pact is over, and the crown will soon be mine.
It's the fatal flaw of mortal kind. Take away their free will and they call you a tyrant. Allow them to indulge it and they become tyrants. You would would have been heroes if you'd only dealt fairly with me. Instead, you're not so different to doomed Carsus, overreaching your limits and burning your world to ash. Hope. It always burns you in the end, little mouse.
While Raphael finished monologuing, I flew off into my stimulants, allowing me to blast 2 Cambions as Yurgir shanked Corella and went invisible. Raphael began consuming souls as he incinerated me, while his Cambion started beaming us with rays of fire, interrupting Hope's blessing and clearing my mirror images. Just as the Cambions began to surround Hope, she called out to her god to intervene, sundering herself in the process, but holding on with her death ward. Seeing Hope in danger, I blasted a Cambion off myself, clearing my way to blast 2 more off Hope and curse Raphael as he drained Hope's soul. As Hope fell, I flew off to blast the remaining Cambion before flying back into my invisibility potion and healing just as my stimulants wore off. Raphael called in more debtors to search for us, but Yurgir grabbed the attention, allowing me to cover myself with Armor of Agathis and Hex Raphael. Yurgir continued to hold off the debtors while Raphael turned back to incinerate. But after chugging a health potion, I was able to group up our enemies using my squid powers, allowing Yurgir to blast them all away. As Raphael called for more backup, I chugged more stimulants to blast him twice. Yurgir was quick to shank the debtor, revealing him to be 3 imps, who he blasted through the doorway. Raphael tried slipping away as he kept trying to spark me, but I stayed on him, gripping narcotics to keep blasting him. As I chased down Raphael, Yurgir started tweaking to block the door, preventing Raphael from calling for backup. With Raphael now isolated, I ran him down, blasting him away. After looting Raphael, I rushed over to Yurgir to help him come down. Just as I began to feel my warlock powers draining, Yurgir proposed to take up the role of my patron. We fought well together, so I agreed, maintaining my powers as he teleported me back to the Baldur Tribunal with my completed hit list. The Tribunal approved of my assassinations and guided me into their inner sanctum for the final step of my initiation, murdering the elephant investigator from the brothel. So I slaughtered the elephant without question. With that, I descended to be baptized in blood.
Behold, Father, baptized in your most wretched name, a new, unholy assassin.
How did I end up here? I had no intention to this. This was supposed to be a good playthrough. Am I the bad guy? Am I the villain? As I rose as an unholy assassin, Saravok gifted me with an amulet that would grant me access to Ord's sewer temple, along with a map to get there. Although I had broken my paladin oath by slaughtering the elephant, Saravok spoke true, and I was now more powerful than ever. The legendary 8-5 split the level 13 paladin here. With that, I followed Saravok's map and used the amulet to enter Ord's sewer temple. I arrived to see Lae'zel held hostage on a sacrificial altar, surrounded by Orin and her assassins. With Lae'zel's life on the line, there was no time for talking, so I summoned illusory copies of myself and used my squid powers to set up a mind sanctuary to hasten myself. Before Orin could harm Lae'zel, I launched my attack by rolling in a stink cloud before zapping one assassin. Orin immediately teleported over to shank me, but I was able to keep zapping, electrocuting another 3 assassins before cursing Orin. Orin then transformed into a grotesque monstrosity while her assassin tried to stun me. As the remaining assassins powered up Orin, they threatened me with instant death if I didn't eliminate them fast enough. So I quickly turned my attention to chain zap all of the remaining chanting assassins, giving me some room to breathe. After teleporting over to blast the last assassin, I was able to isolate Orin. As I flew to the opposite side of my stink cloud, I initiated my reverse gank maneuver, calling in the cavalry to jump Orin. After a couple whiffs, my elemental landed a hit, baiting Orin's attention away from me. I took this opening to chug my stims and start blasting, tearing right through Orin's defenses. Orin responded by growling at me before trying to even the playing field by summoning skeletons. But this only gave me time to rip my narcotics to keep blasting, eating a lash in the process but eliminating Orin. As Orin fell, I rushed over to release Lae'zel from the altar. Lae'zel gave her thanks, and after I invited her back to camp to stay with Chosen of Shar Shadowheart, I collected Orin's rock. So now the only thing left to do was cross Gortash for his rock, so I could control the brain and claim the power of a god. Thus, I set off on the long journey back to Worm's Rock Fortress. Although the area was being patrolled by Gortash's remaining guards, I was able to use my squid powers to fly directly to the top of his fortress. From there, I broke in through the balcony entrance to launch my assassination of the president of Baldur's Gate. I immediately rolled in a shroud of darkness to conceal my presence as I teleported over to Gortash himself. After summoning illusory copies of myself to play things safe, I started booming. Gortash was forced to call upon his god just to survive, making him completely immune to my blasts. On top of that, not only had I forgot to protect myself with Armor of Agathis, my surprise attack had unexpectedly left me unable to swing again. But I was covered by my darkness, which confused my enemies to dash around the room, shooting their own allies. Gortash himself then tried binding me with his chains of tyranny, but was unsuccessful. I was then open to fly across the blasted guard, but my squid powers prevented the activation of my bloodlust. So I turned to curse Gortash, only for him to threaten me with a finger of his god. With the possibility of death hovering over my head, I panicked and began to rip my narcotics to summon a baby bubble. Although I was protected, my darkness was now lifted, allowing a guard to see me and try commanding me to halt. In my panic state, I overlooked my squid power to dominate and warlock power to counterspell, instead choosing to lash out at the guard. My brutal misplay allowed the guard to halt me in place, breaking my concentration on my baby bubble. Now entirely vulnerable, my enemies began to rush in, clearing my mirror images and leaving me open for Gortash to threaten me with another god finger as he started socking me himself. Still held in place by the command halt of the guard, one god finger came down, nearly taking me out. On my last leg, another guard commanded me to halt again, but I now had the realization to counterspell. Now luck shifted my way as I resisted the spells of a guard twice before getting stabbed twice by another. But I was able to hang on just barely as Gortash threatened me with another god finger before luckily whiffing 2 punches. But my power trip had caught up with me, and the jitters from my narcotic addiction kicked in. Even while suffering withdrawals, I was still able to use the last bit of my squid powers to dominate a guard trying to halt me again and dodge shot after shot from my enemies. But hope had died long ago, and down came the finger of God, ending the story of the villain of Baldur's Gate. So that means it's time to run it back, but next time, I may have some evil tendencies.
This city is mine!